If you love heart-touching survival stories, make sure to subscribe, share, and leave your thoughts below. Your support keeps these miracles alive. Blue Heart. The wind had a cruel voice that day. It howled like a mother crying out for her lost child, rushing across the endless stretch of frozen Arctic, dragging with it tiny shards of ice sharp enough to sting the skin. There was no sun, just a faint silver glow smothered by thick clouds, casting a dim light over the snow-covered emptiness. The world looked like it had paused. Nothing moved. No sound except that wind. But beneath that silence, something was struggling to stay alive. At first it looked like a lump of snow. Just another broken piece of ice out there on the white horizon. But if you looked closer, just a little closer, you could see it was breathing. Barely. A tiny rise and fall in the snowdrift. And then a soft sound. Not a roar. Not a growl. Just a faint, dry whimper. The polar bear cub was no older than a few weeks. Small, fragile, its white fur matted with ice crystals. Its little black nose twitched as it lay motionless against the hard ice. One of its back legs was twisted unnaturally as if it had fallen, hard. Blood, barely visible in the snow, had dried around the fur near the joint. There was no mother in sight. No warmth. No food. And the wind wasn't done. It roared again, louder this time, pushing fresh waves of snow across the cub's tiny body. Every gust buried it a little deeper. Every second stole more of its fading heat. The cub tried to lift its head, but it barely managed an inch before it collapsed again, too weak to cry. Its eyes opened, just a slit. Everything looked like a blur. The sky, the snow, the edge of a cracked glacier not far away. It could no longer tell the difference between sleep and death. All it had now was instinct. That faint, silent instinct to keep breathing, just in case someone heard. But who could hear out here? The Arctic was empty for miles. No birds. No seals. No scent of fish. No heartbeat of a mother. Just ice. Just cold. Just dying hope. And then soft crunching. Distant. Faint. But real. The cub's ear twitched. Something was moving. Footsteps. Not fast. Careful. And heavy. It wasn't another bear. Bears don't walk like that. This was two-legged. Slower. Hesitant. As if afraid of what they might find. The sound stopped. Then silence again. No. Oh my God, a voice whispered. Human. Mel. Soft. Full of disbelief. And heartbreak. He had found it. The man dropped to his knees slowly, like he was afraid that even the sound of his breath might shatter the moment. His gloved hands trembled as he reached out but paused, hovering just inches from the cub. It wasn't dead. Not yet. Hey, little one, can you hear me? The cub blinked. Its ears barely moved. The man leaned closer, trying to shelter the small body with his coat, shielding it from the punishing wind. His name was Thomas Raines, a wildlife photographer from Minnesota, on assignment for a documentary that never imagined something like this. He'd come to capture the beauty of Arctic survival, but what he found instead was the tragedy of it. He looked around. No tracks. No signs of a mother. Just endless white and cracking ice. She's alone, he murmured to himself, voice breaking. For a moment he forgot about the camera slung around his neck. Forgot about the checklist and the schedule. All he could see now was this fragile life, barely holding on. Hang in there, he whispered again. You're not going to die out here. Not like this. He gently touched the cub's side. It flinched barely but didn't resist. Thomas could feel how cold it was. Not just cold, freezing to the bone. The kind of cold that no creature survives for long. He knew time was ticking. The Arctic doesn't forgive. He took off his outer parka without a second thought, wrapping it around the cub like a blanket. Snow bit into his own skin, but he didn't care. He pulled the little body close, careful not to touch the injured leg. We need to move. Now. But move where? His snowmobile was over 2 miles away, parked near the base camp nestled against a line of old glacier rocks. The storm was building behind him. The snow was getting thicker. Visibility dropping. He had no radio signal. No flare gun. It was just him. And this helpless cub. For a few long seconds, Thomas just held it against his chest, the cub's faint breath tickling his neck like a ghost. He could feel the slow, thready heartbeat beneath the fur. Fainter than any he'd ever felt. But it was still there. Still fighting. He stood up, legs stiff from kneeling on ice, and looked toward the distant blur that marked his camp. No path. No markers. Nothing to guide him but memory and hope. And the weight of a dying soul in his arms. The snow fell harder now. Each flake stung like glass. His breath came out in clouds. But he didn't stop. With one arm cradling the cub, and the other shielding both their faces, Thomas began walking into the white unknown. The wind screamed in his ears, and every step felt like dragging lead boots across quicksand. But he kept going. Because some part of him knew. This wasn't just an animal. This wasn't just a picture. This was a life. And it was now his responsibility. Behind them, the wind swept across the ice once more, erasing every footprint they left behind, like they were never there. But they were. And their journey had only just begun. The snow hit harder with each step. Thomas could barely see 10 feet ahead now. The horizon had vanished into a sea of white. The wind didn't just blow anymore, it screamed, clawing at his face, tugging at his coat, almost as if the storm itself wanted to take the cub back. His arms burned from cradling the fragile weight against his chest. Not because the cub was heavy, but because he was clenching it so tightly, as if the moment he loosened his grip, it would slip into the cold forever. The tiny body barely moved. No sounds, no struggle. Just the faintest warmth soaking into his shirt. Every second was precious. But every second also dragged like a lifetime. His boots sank deep into drifts. The snow was thicker now, so thick it pulled at his legs like it wanted him to stay. One wrong step and he could disappear beneath it. One wrong breath and frostbite could eat through his lungs. But Thomas didn't stop. He couldn't. He looked down briefly. The cub's eyes were closed now. Its breath was shallower than before. The tip of its nose twitched once and then nothing. It wasn't crying. It wasn't fighting. It was giving up. Not yet, he muttered. You don't get to give up. Not on my watch. But doubt crept into his mind. Was he too late? The base camp felt like a dream now. He remembered it being close. Remembered a ridge of ice he used as a marker. But everything looked the same in the storm. Just blinding white in every direction. No shapes. No shadows. Just the sound of his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. A deep crack echoed through the air. Thomas froze. Another crack, louder, sharper. It rolled under his boots like thunder trapped beneath the earth. He looked down. The snow around him was splitting. Thin veins of black opened beneath the surface, zigzagging like lightning across the ice. A pressure crack. Oh no! He shifted his weight slowly, praying the ice would hold. But the ground beneath him groaned. Then another sound, shhk. A quick snap like a whip. The cub stirred in his arms. Thomas didn't wait. He moved. Careful. Deliberate. One foot. Then another. Not fast but steady. The ground was betraying him. A sudden boom exploded behind him. A sheet of ice had collapsed less than 50 feet away, breaking into chunks and falling into freezing black water. He had stopped just moments longer. His breath hitched but he kept going. The cold air was slicing into his lungs now. Every breath tasted like metal. He could feel his fingers starting to go numb, even through the gloves. His beard was coated in frost. The cub whimpered. A small sound. Barely there. But it was enough. You're still with me, Thomas whispered hoarsely. Good. You hold on. Just a little longer. Another gust slammed into him, nearly knocking him sideways. He staggered, but held tight to the tiny life in his arms. The wind screamed so loud now that it drowned everything else. There were no birds. No echoes. No mercy. But Thomas kept walking. Because stopping meant death. The cold was turning his legs stiff. His boots, wet. His jacket, soaked through with snow. His thoughts, sluggish. Every few minutes he had to blink hard just to keep focus. His hands had gone from burning to tingling. That was a bad sign. That meant frostbite had begun its slow, silent crawl. But he looked down again at the cub. Its mouth opened slightly. It let out the smallest, rasping cry. A sound like wind whistling through a broken flute. Still alive. Still fighting. And Thomas, despite the pain, felt a new surge of strength. He tightened his grip, shifted the cub closer to his heart and trudged forward. Step. Breathe. Step. Breathe. The storm didn't let up. The sky had turned a ghostly shade of gray, and the snowflakes no longer fell. They flew sideways, slashing at his eyes and cheeks. But far ahead he saw it. A shadow. No, a shape. Dark. Angular. The supply sled. His camp. He was close. But just then, a howl. Oh, distant. And unmistakable. A second howl answered. Wolves. Thomas didn't stop, but fear gripped his spine. Out here wolves traveled in packs. And in blizzards they hunted the weak. They could smell blood. They could hear the sound of something suffering, something slow. Easy. He picked up pace. His boots slid. He almost fell. But he didn't stop. He reached the sled. Threw back the flap. Inside, a folded emergency tarp. Some fuel cans. Water frozen solid. A medical kit. And a heat pack. He laid the cub gently inside on the tarp. Its fur was crusted with frost. It didn't move. No sound. No breath. Hey HY, he cried out, voice cracking. He opened the heat pack, shook it violently. Tucked it beneath the cub's chest. Rubbed the sides of the tiny body. Don't you go now. Not when we're this close. He wasn't crying. Not yet. But something burned behind his eyes. Then finally, a twitch. A shallow breath. A blink. You're still here, he whispered, voice shaking. But the howling came again. Closer. This time behind the sled. The wolves had found them. Thomas zipped the tarp shut halfway to block the snow. His fingers were shaking too hard to work fast. He reached for the flare. Gone. He cursed under his breath. He grabbed the metal pole from the sled's corner and held it like a spear. The cub was safe for now. But he wasn't. The wind screamed. And the wolves were getting closer. Thomas stood between the sled and the storm, breath heaving, pulse pounding in his ears louder than the wind. The metal rod in his hand trembled, not just from the cold but from the raw truth that was starting to sink in. He was outnumbered. Outmatched. And if the wolves came any closer he might not make it out. Another howl. Closer now. Maybe 100 feet away. He couldn't see them yet, but he felt them, moving silently through the white, just shadows on snow. He glanced down at the sled where the cub lay wrapped inside the tarp. The heat pack was working. He could see the small rise and fall of its chest again. Weak, but breathing. He couldn't let it end here. Come on, he growled to himself, grabbing the sled rope and yanking hard. It didn't move. The snow had built too high around it. Thomas dropped to his knees and started digging, scooping heavy clumps of snow away with numb hands, urgency scraping away his exhaustion. Every second counted. Another sound, a growl this time. He looked up. A shape appeared. Then another. Wolves. Their eyes glowed amber in the stormlight. Their fur was slick with frost, their breath visible in sharp clouds. 5 of them, maybe 6. Forming a semicircle. Watching. Waiting. Thomas gripped the rod tighter. Don't even think about it, he muttered. The lead wolf stepped forward. Low to the ground. Stalking. Testing. Thomas stood tall, spreading his arms to make himself look bigger, shouting hoarsely into the wind. Get back. Go on. The wolves didn't flinch. And then crack, a gunshot. Thomas ducked instinctively, covering the sled with his body. One of the wolves yelped and vanished into the white. A second shot rang out. The rest scattered, melting into the storm like ghosts. Silence. For a moment Thomas just stared at the snow. Then a voice shouted through the wind. Are you alive? He turned. A figure was running toward him, head covered, rifle slung over her back, a red scarf whipping in the storm. She wore a thick parka patched with fur and old repair stitches. She wasn't from the crew. She wasn't from any base. She was Inuit. By the time she reached him, Thomas had collapsed to one knee, breathing hard. The woman didn't waste time with questions. She reached for the sled, looked inside, and froze. She looked back at him. Where did you find it? 2 miles east, by a broken ridge. She reached down, brushing the cub's fur gently, her fingers delicate, respectful. She touched behind its ear, checking for a reaction. You shouldn't have moved it, she said quietly. I didn't have a choice, Thomas replied, voice hoarse. It was dying. She nodded slowly. Not judgment. Just understanding. My name is Anna, she said after a pause. My grandfather used to say, sometimes the ice gives you a gift when you least expect it. Thomas chuckled bitterly. Some gift. She looked him over, then held out her hand. Can you walk? Barely. We need to go. Wolves may return. They worked quickly. Anna helped tie the sled with rope, adjusting the tarp to shield the cub better. She handed Thomas a second scarf from her pack, wrapping it around his neck without asking. Then they moved, fast and quiet, across the white landscape. Thomas had no idea where they were headed. But for the first time since the storm began, he didn't feel alone. They reached Anna's cabin an hour later, a small wooden structure nestled into a ridge, half buried in snow but still standing strong against the storm. The inside smelled of cedar smoke and dried herbs. A fire crackled in the hearth, and the warmth hit like heaven after hours of biting wind. Thomas sat beside the fire, boots off, hands trembling as they thawed. Anna placed the cub gently in a thick wool blanket near the flames. It didn't wake up. But it didn't stop breathing either. She fed it with a small bottle, something she had for orphaned animals, she said. A mixture of goat's milk, fish oil, and warmth. The cub twitched once and its tongue moved slowly. That single motion nearly brought Thomas to tears. He watched in silence. There was something sacred about it, the way Anna moved, the way she whispered to the cub in her native tongue. As if words carried healing when spoken softly enough. After a while, she sat beside him and poured tea into 2 carved cups. He sipped. Warm. Bitter. Comforting. You could have left me out there, he said. I don't leave things behind, she replied. He looked at her. Why do you live out here alone? She shrugged. To hear things you can't hear when the world is too loud. They sat in silence again. Only the fire spoke. Then Anna turned her gaze toward the cub. Its mother may be alive. Or not. The snow hides many things. But this one, he's a fighter. Thomas nodded, staring at the little bundle of fur. I didn't think I could care this much. I've taken pictures of animals my whole life. But this is different. You've touched its life, she said. And it touched yours. The storm outside howled one final time, and then began to quiet. The wind softened. The fire glowed. And in that tiny cabin in the middle of nowhere, 3 hearts, 2 human, 1 barely beating, found warmth that no blizzard could steal. The next morning the storm was gone. The world outside Anna's cabin lay in silence, thick, white, untouched. The kind of silence that feels sacred, like the land was holding its breath. Thomas stepped outside and was met by a sea of blinding brightness. The sun glinted off the ice, almost too beautiful to believe. But inside the cabin, things were not so peaceful. The cub was getting weaker again. Anna noticed it first. She'd been watching him closely through the night, feeding him by drops, keeping him warm, whispering softly in her native tongue. But now, something had changed. He's breathing shallow, she said, touching the cub's side. Too shallow. Thomas crouched beside her, his hand trembling as he placed it gently on the cub's head. The warmth was fading. Its small body, so fragile, was going still again. No, 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 he muttered. You were getting better. Anna moved quickly. She went to the back room and returned with a wrapped bundle, her emergency medical pouch. Inside she had an old, half-used vial of antibiotics, sealed in a thermos to keep it from freezing. She pulled a tiny syringe from a carved wooden box. This might help, if it's infection, she whispered. But the dose, it's meant for foxes. Not bears. Thomas didn't hesitate. Do it. She looked at him. It might hurt him. He's dying anyway. Anna nodded slowly, drawing the syringe carefully. She knelt beside the cub and injected it just beneath the fur, between its shoulder blades. The cub flinched weakly, but didn't cry. Then the waiting began. An hour passed. Still no change. Thomas paced back and forth in the cabin, heart racing. He felt helpless, utterly helpless, and that was worse than the cold, worse than the wolves, worse than anything the storm had thrown at him. And then, just as the afternoon sun dipped low in the sky, a sound. A long, slow exhale from the cub. Its eyes fluttered open. Barely. But enough. It looked at Thomas. Not just through him, at him. Like it remembered him. And in that moment, Thomas sank to his knees and let the tears fall, quiet, hot tears that had been waiting for too long. You're still here, he whispered. You're still fighting. But just as hope returned, danger came again. A howl. Not distant this time. Right outside. Anna froze. She moved to the window, pulling the curtain just an inch. She didn't speak for a long second. Then her voice came out, barely a breath. It's her. Thomas stood. Who? Anna's eyes met his. The mother. He rushed to the door and stepped outside. And there, barely 50 feet away, stood the largest polar bear Thomas had ever seen. Her fur was streaked with ice and blood. Her eyes were wild. Her breath steamed in the frozen air like fire. And her chest was heaving. She was limping. Wounded. Starving. Desperate. And her eyes, locked straight onto him. Thomas stepped back, heart pounding. She's here for the cub, he said, almost in disbelief. But Anna didn't look relieved. She looked terrified. She's wild. And injured. If she sees you with the cub, she may attack. Thomas looked at the door. Then at the sled where the cub had been earlier. It was now inside. Safe. Hidden. But the mother didn't know that. She began to advance. 1 step. 2. Each step shaking the ground just a little. Her size was overwhelming. Her power, undeniable. And her pain, unmistakable. She thinks I took her baby, Thomas realized aloud. She doesn't know. Back inside, Anna whispered urgently. But Thomas didn't move. He looked behind him, at the tiny cub lying by the fire, chest rising slowly. Then forward, at the massive mother coming closer, sniffing the air. And something inside him broke open. He stepped forward. "No!" Anna cried out. "She'll kill you." But Thomas raised both hands slowly, palms out. "I have to try." She was 30 feet away now. Then 20. Thomas crouched low, unzipped his parka carefully and pulled out the wool blanket, holding it open just enough to reveal what was inside. The mother froze. Her nose twitched. Then, another step. And another. Thomas dropped to one knee, eyes never leaving hers. His breath fogged the air between them. His heart thundered in his chest. She was 10 feet away now. And then, she stopped. The wind shifted. The scent reached her. The smell of her cub. Her head tilted. A sound escaped her lips, not a growl, but something lower, sadder. A moan. A cry. Thomas slowly placed the blanket down on the snow. He backed away step by careful step, never turning his back. The mother moved forward, cautious, trembling, bleeding. And when she reached the bundle, she sniffed it. Once. Twice. Then lowered her massive head. A moment passed. Two. And then she let out a long, mournful rumble from deep inside her chest. The cub stirred. Its eyes opened. A weak whimper. The mother responded instantly, lowering herself, pressing her nose against her baby's head, nuzzling, licking, wrapping her massive body around the tiny form. Thomas watched, barely able to breathe. He turned to Anna, who had stepped outside silently, hands over her mouth. And then, it happened. The cub struggled, then moved. Tiny pause. A whimper. A twitch of the ear. It recognized her. Their reunion, silent, wordless, was more powerful than any cry. But then the twist came. A low cracking sound. Not from the ice. From Anna. She had fallen. Thomas ran to her. She was holding her side, face pale. "I slipped," she whispered. "Something's not right." He helped her sit. She winced hard. "My ribs." Thomas looked toward the mother and cub, still reunited, still huddled. Then back at Anna. 2 lives. One already broken. One just beginning to heal. And in that cruel, cold moment, the world asked Thomas for another sacrifice. Thomas held Anna in his arms, feeling her breath grow shallow. The cold had bitten deep. The fall had done its damage. And now, inside the silence of that white wilderness, he could see it in her eyes. She was hurting. "But I'll get help," he whispered, voice cracking as he looked toward the radio on the shelf. "I'll call someone. We'll get you to the outpost." Anna's hand gripped his wrist, weak but firm. "No," she whispered, blinking slowly. "Not yet. You need." "I know," she said, voice trembling. "But look." She lifted her chin slightly toward the clearing. Thomas turned his head. And what he saw made his chest tighten so hard he forgot to breathe. The mother polar bear was lying on her side now, curled protectively around her cub. Her head rested gently on the snow, and her eyes, those wild, fierce eyes from earlier, were soft. Watching. Guarding. The cub, now nestled deep into her warmth, was sleeping again. Not from weakness this time. From safety. From peace. "They found each other again," Anna whispered. "And you did that." Thomas didn't speak. He couldn't. He just watched, heart cracked wide open, as the 2 bears, separated by storm, suffering and fate, were made whole again. And something shifted in him. Something deep. This wasn't just about one cub anymore. Or one storm. Or one rescuer trying to do the right thing. It was about every heartbeat struggling to survive against a world changing faster than it could understand. The sun was starting to dip behind the white ridges, painting everything in golden light. It shimmered off the ice. It sparkled on the snow. It danced in the mother bear's fur like firelight. Thomas turned to Anna. Her eyes were still open, watching too. "Do you believe in signs?" he asked quietly. She smiled faintly. "Out here, that's all we have." He nodded. And right then, without sound, without fanfare, the mother bear stood. Slowly. With care, she nudged her cub toward her chest, and with one gentle lift, she scooped him against her body. He clung to her, barely the size of her paw, but he held on. Then, turning toward the open white, she began to walk. Not fast. Not frantic. Just forward. Step firm. Step sure. And as the mother disappeared into the distant whiteness, her cub safe against her side, Thomas felt something break loose inside him. A sob. Raw. Honest. Unstoppable. He wept. Not from sorrow. But from awe. From relief. from witnessing something so pure, so rare, that it reminded him what this life, all life, is really about. Connection, compassion, survival, together. Hours later, the rescue helicopter arrived. The radio call had gone through after all. Anna was loaded gently onto a stretcher, bundled in thick blankets, her hands still clutching Thomas's. Before she was lifted into the cabin, she turned her face to his and smiled, her lips trembling. "You're not just a photographer anymore," she whispered. Thomas blinked. "Then what am I?" She reached up, touched his face. A bridge between their world and ours. Weeks passed. Thomas returned home. To the noise, the roads, the world. But something had changed. He couldn't look at an image of ice without hearing the cub's soft cry. Couldn't see a stretch of snow without feeling the warmth of that cabin. He spent his nights going through the footage, photos, video clips, audio recordings. Not just documenting a rescue, but capturing a moment when hope beat death. His story spread. Photos went viral. People wept across the world. And the message became clear. Against all odds, life found a way. TV stations asked for interviews. Schools requested talks. Wildlife organizations used his footage to speak louder than charts or graphs ever could. But it wasn't the fame that mattered to Thomas. It was what people felt when they saw those images. What you feel right now. The fragile heartbeat of a cub in a world growing colder. The silent strength of a mother who never stopped searching. The selfless courage of a woman who chose to help. And the truth that in a world spinning faster, kindness is what slows us down enough to save each other. In one of his final interviews, Thomas was asked, "What message would you leave for the world?" He paused, then said softly, "The ice is melting. The world is changing. But if we still have hearts that break, and hands that help, there's hope." Globe showing Americas, but for thousands like them, time is melting away with the ice. The world kept spinning. Cities buzzed. Planes flew overhead. Phones rang. Traffic moved like clockwork. But somewhere, far from all of it, a mother polar bear walked slowly across a stretch of thinning ice, her cub tucked safely against her chest. And somewhere in a quiet home in Montana, Thomas sat by the window of his cabin, sipping warm tea, a thick blanket wrapped around his shoulders. He wasn't looking at his laptop today. Not the photos. Not the viral headlines. Just the snow. Just the silence. And in that stillness, memories flooded in, the cub's whimper, the howl of wind through cracked windows, Anna's weathered voice saying he's still fighting. A few weeks after the rescue, Anna wrote him a letter. Handwritten. Ink smudged in places. Delicate. Read. "The world we knew is vanishing piece by piece. But I've seen what kindness can do, Thomas. It's the only thing that doesn't melt. Don't let the world forget. Tell their story, not just the bears, ours. All of ours." He framed it. Right next to a photo he had taken on the final day before leaving the Arctic. In the picture, a single line of paw prints crosses a snowy plain. Tiny cub prints beside larger ones. No faces. No drama. Just tracks. Proof that something fragile had made it through. Thomas didn't go back to commercial photography. He didn't need to. Instead, he spoke in community halls, nursing homes, and quiet schools where older voices were often forgotten, and younger hearts still open. He told the story, slowly, gently. And when he got to the part where the cub looked up at him with those tired, hopeful eyes, there were always tears. And always silence. Because they understood. Not just the danger of a melting world, but the beauty of a world still worth saving. He ended every story session with the same words. In the end, it wasn't strength that saved that cub. It wasn't technology. It wasn't luck. It was a moment of kindness. Quiet. Ordinary. Human. And in a world growing colder, one act of kindness still burns bright. Globe showing America somewhere right now, another cub is crying into the wind. Another mother is searching. Another rescuer is deciding whether to turn back, or take one more step forward. And somewhere in the hearts of those who listen, a seed is planted. A truth is remembered. That survival is never a solo act. And the smallest life is always worth the biggest fight. So if this story moved you, even a little, share it. Speak it. Carry it forward. Because their voices can't reach the world. But yours can. Together we can be the warmth in the cold. The light on the ice. The hands that heal. Droplet, in every melting snowflake, there's a heartbeat waiting to be saved. Be their voice. Be their hope. Subscribe. Share. And never stop believing in second chances.